We're not just a couple of middle-aged fat guys talking about classic rock. We're going bald, too. It's the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.
And that's nothing but pure and simple old-fashioned communism.
Some French critics called it disgusting, repellent, a cultural Chernobyl. But when I was there, I was as happy as a little girl.
That's right. That's my gift to you.
Can't no one compel another man to engage in recreation. Certainly not a son of a gun as ill-humored as yourself.
Winner of this week's Gulf Coast Golf Classic was Chai Chai Rodriguez.
There's a rumor going around the circus that that dwarf and the elephant were lovers.
I have wrestled with an alligator. I done tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning, throw thunder and gale. That's bad.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Ready to move out.
Before we start, I'd like to say something. There's no reason why you shouldn't have complete confidence in your chances to come out of this thing alive and in one piece.
From coast to coast, from border to border, from one end to the other and all points in between, the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast is on.
Yes! That's awesome!
We crank up and break down the great guitar-driven rock of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And you are invited to come along.
We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes, it's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
And now, your hosts, Jeremy Lunnan and J.R. Stanton.
We've got to protect our phony baloney job, gentlemen. We must do something about this immediately.
It's time for the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.
Well, here we are, JR. Wasn't the last time we did this like 2021 or something?
Well, it's been long enough that, I've put a couple of inches down here below the chin.
I see that, and I was clean shaven last time we did this. So,
it's like that progression, of aging,
yes.
That time lapse.
That's exactly what it is. And I have to say, it's been like over a month at least. I don't remember exactly, maybe 2 months, but it's my fault. And here's what's really sad. JR's like ready to do it, but like both times, I'm like just spaced it. Like I was on the way to Montana the last time, and JR, I remember I'm literally like heading down the highway, and I'm like, oh crap! It's like in 10 minutes we're supposed to be doing the podcast, and I text JR and say, JR, dude, I'm on my way to Montana. I can't do it. And JR sends back this picture of him with his headphones on, microphone ready. And you know what it made me think of, JR?
What was that?
Remember that song Cats in the Cradle?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the little boy all he wants his dad to do is catch with him.
Yeah, that's all I wanted, Jeremy. Just a few minutes of your time, man. And there I am with a tear over my eye.
Yeah, I felt bad. I felt like the deadbeat dad in the Cats in the Cradle song.
Well, I intentionally sent that photo in time too. It was, it was almost immediate. I am here.
Yeah, he was there, ready to go, and here I was. I just left him hanging. He was stood up.
Hey, here's the thing. It's never live and dangerous until it's live and dangerous. So if there was spontaneity, that's the key to the flavor of what we do, dangerous.
Yeah, and
you would never know if the show's going on or not.
And the emphasis is on the danger more than the live, I think.
The danger.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so we're going to talk about a classic album. In fact, the most successful hard rock album ever.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
And it's incredible on so many levels, and we'll get to that. But before we do that, just a few things, some housekeeping things, some other things. You'll notice, JR, I know you've noticed, we started to do, I say we, but it's really me because JR's like working. He's got a job.
I got a real job, but hey, that somebody has to pay for the bills. So
exactly. I mean, that's not a real rock and roll lifestyle, JR.
You don't have to wrap me out like this.
You're working. But anyways, I've started to do a daily update on X. You can check it out on X. It's on YouTube. It's on Facebook. And so every day we just do a little quick update music in the news, or news about music, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, so good. I mean,
yeah, I think it's a neat little pick me up. I'll be honest with you. Even if I can't join you live and enjoy that piece, I know that a couple of times I actually clicked it on live where obviously I'm typing.
I appreciate it. Yeah. So but, you're probably with a patient.
Actually, don't mention that part.
But, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. This Joan, I have no idea. What was that?
I hear from JR in the middle of the. But what's interesting is those updates are usually only like 10 or 15 minutes long. Brilliant. But I still get comments. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, do I break in the middle and respond to? So I'm still trying to figure out what to do with it.
I'll tell you, I think it's next level. I think those tiny morsels of information, it keeps you fresh. One of the things that we're banging on you a little bit for the myths on the podcast, but I don't know, to do what you're doing on a daily basis, week to week, putting those small blurbs that still very informative, very timely morsels. I like that. I mean, I like it well enough to tune in. So,
well, good. That's saying something. I mean, especially since you're part of the show, I mean, it's nice that you tune in.
Yeah, between Mrs. Jones.
So, here's the way I look at it. I mean, you can go anywhere to get news.
Yeah.
But we talk about the important stuff. We're talking about classic rock news.
Things that are relative to you.
Absolutely. About the good stuff. And one thing that I mentioned today, and I don't know why I'm so excited about this, probably because I liked the last one so much. I mentioned it today. The new Dokken album comes out tomorrow. And we're going to talk about that on the update tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I like the fact that, you can it just kind of gives us a lot of hope into the future when of course he's making no excuses, but you get to a certain age. Hey, if you're still up on stage and putting on a good show.
Yeah.
And I think Dokken certainly can deliver on the theatrics.
The band is really good. You mentioned you sent me the text with the guy. Is it John Levin? Is that his name?
John Levin.
John Levin is the guitarist in Dokken, and I meant it when I said he sounds more like George Lynch than George Lynch does. I mean, seriously, he's really good. And so that's what I liked about the last Dokken album.
Broken Bones?
There was one before that. It was something back again. I can't remember. It was like 2012, but I really liked it. I really dug it. So I'm looking forward to this one. And the leadoff single, Over the Mountain, sounds really good. So I'm looking forward to it. Don is he's not pushing the envelope vocally. Mm-hmm. So you can tell he's 70 years old. He's taking it easy, but it sounds good.
I think that getting there, the personality, the experience of being, in a live venue, I think it's worth the money. I didn't mention this to you, but I'll be on the road tomorrow. I'm heading to Houston, Bonamesa.
There you go. Nice.
Got some tickets, man.
We'll want to report.
Yeah, I will. I'll report back. I'll tell you that this will be my second pilgrimage to Houston for the similar concert.
So who's there? Tell us what's going on.
Basically it's him and his set. But last time he had again he had a lot of notoriety. Individuals. He had the keyboard from Stevie Ray Vaughan that plays with him.
Wow.
A lot of it's always fun because he can move. Bonamesa can move between genres. And is believable on all of them. And I was talking to a client of mine today saying, what I like most about it is, he's pretty believable in any aspect, whether he's throwing a rock at you or if he's going back and revisiting the blues. He plays so well that you can't, heck, he can play flamenco. So
this will tell you the kind of brother I am. Okay. So about a year ago, I had a chance to go see Joe Bonamassa here in town.
Oh,
a friend of mine. He's a friend of mine and my brother, Jeff. My brother, Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff.
So he calls me, Chris calls me and says, hey, I got a ticket to see Bonamassa. You want to go with me? Well, I had a commitment and I couldn't go and I was bummed. And I said, but you know what? My brother, Jeff, would love to go. He said, yeah, I'll take Jeff. So Jeff went and saw Bonamassa in my place and said it was really good. So
hey, from start to finish, he doesn't miss. There's, sometimes you're watching a show and there's a lull. There's things kind of a lull in the middle, but not with him. And the reason why is he can change it up so quick, and that's the other side is that he's so significantly talented. But what I like about him too is he's also kind of a nerd.
he's a total nerd. Yeah. El Pizzle, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you coming on. And Bruce K also, thanks for joining us. And Bonamassa is great. And he's the first one to tell you he's a nerd. And he's got one of the greatest collections of not only vintage guitars, but vintage amps. It's like a museum. His house is like a museum.
Well, that's probably why he can play so well. And you could probably plug in, to anything and sound great. Yeah. And familiarity as well. It didn't seem like there was too many things that he hasn't been accomplished on. But again, I'm looking forward to the concert. I'll be there. It's Saturday. It's when we're going to be there.
Awesome.
Me and my brother. Guess what? Brother came through. He's
Absolutely.
buying tickets. I just go down. All I have to do is get there.
Yeah, it's great. Bruce has seen Joe twice at the Fox Theater in Atlanta. So yeah, my brother loved the show. My brother was familiar with them, but my brother's not the same level of nerdiness getting into music than I am, but he liked it. Said the sound was really good. Everyone's a great player. You mentioned Reese Winans, the keyboard player, was there. Yeah, he said it was a great show. So
excellent.
That's awesome. By the way, our chat is open, or comments are open, whether you're on, if it works on Facebook. I can't remember. We were having problems with Facebook before, but on YouTube and Twitter or X, you should be able to put your comments in if you want to. Okay, now, when we come back, JR, we're going to dive into a phenomenal album from 1980, phenomenal history. It's an album that shouldn't have worked, but it did work. And we're going to talk about that when we come back.
Hey, this is Jeremy Lunnan, host of the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast. If you're a business owner trying to market your products or services to a growing audience, let me invite you to consider advertising here on our podcast. The Classic Guitar Rock Podcast is currently rated in the top 2.5% globally, according to listennotes.com. And our prime demographic is males aged 35 to 59. Here's one of the great things about advertising with us. An ad you run with us today will still be getting played 5 or 10 years from now. Because our episodes never expire, neither will the ads you run with us. Think about that. As our audience continues to grow, you are locked in with an ad you place now at a very low rate. It really is a phenomenal investment. If you think our demo is a great fit for your offering, it really is a no-brainer. We can do anything from a simple host-read ad to a fully produced commercial. Either way, you will be shocked at how economical it is to advertise on the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast. If you're interested, please email me, Jeremy, at classicguitarrock@mail.com. But hurry, because availability is limited.
Exclusively on ESPN Plus, UFC 313, Saturday. Reigning light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira defends his title against number one contender Magomed Ankalaev, and an explosive lightweight bout between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Pazzi. UFC 313, Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Buy it on ESPNplus.com/PPV.
4 out of 5 doctors surveyed don't recommend listening to this program.
I always listen when I'm sitting on the toilet.
It's the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.
So first I'm going to start with the question, JR.
Ask it.
Your first, that you can remember, your first exposure, not just to Back in Black, but to AC/DC. What's your first recollection of AC/DC?
Well, 6th grade, cassette player. My buddy Keith Kosachani, he was huge on AC/DC, but then my other buddy Robert Payne, big guy. Got away with anything on purchases, and he got that tape fairly early, and in terms of coming out, because of course rural Oklahoma, you don't just get the latest release. But no, he had that. I remember the I rushed in and Back in Black was it, because the title track was, there was a lot of people release wise that I think may have gravitated to, like, You Shook Me All Night Long, something like that. But Back in Black was, when I came on board, I guess that would have been later in the year, but December, somewhere in that time frame. And
that's awesome.
Yes, because I'm cheating and looking when it was released, but that would have been the first song that I remember, and I remember because of the beat, and you could dismiss some of the other language that might, because they're definitely colorful in their language of and lyric. But no, I came on board with Back in Black. I can tell you that it's one of those grinding to a crescendo style riff and music that it's going to stick with you. So yeah, I liked it. I'll tell you something that was kind of funny. I always equate AC/DC to that 79 and the 80 Trans Am from Smokey and the Bandit. It's kind of funny. Okay. I never could figure out why, but
it works, right? Mm-hmm. If you saw the TA going down the road, you would almost expect Back in Black to be cranking out of it. No, I totally get that.
Yeah. Well, I think Smokey and the Bandit came out around the same time. It
was a little
one
before.
Or two. Yeah. Well, two.
Two would have been. Yeah.
But
totally.
And in Apache, Oklahoma, if you were hitting on all cylinders. If you had AC/DC, T-tops off on the Trans Am, and you're blaring down Main Street. You didn't have any money for anything else, but you
were living large
out on Main Street, and so that sort of thing kind of stands out, in my mind.
That's awesome. I was thinking about and probably about the same time. There's something about sixth grade for me. Mm-hmm. Sixth grade was when I was starting to pay attention to music and kind of forming my own musical opinions. And for me, my first exposure to AC/DC was actually not Back in Black. I can remember I lived on Fort Sill. This would have been like 79.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always walk up to the PX, the Post Exchange, which is a big department store.
Mm-hmm.
And the records were cheap there. A new record was either $5.50 or $6.50. So they weren't very expensive. But I can remember the first time seeing AC/DC albums. I remember the Powerage album.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that stuck with me because it left mental scars was the If You Want Blood, You Got It album, where on the back, the guitar's jabbed into Angus's back and there's blood all over. I just remember thinking, who is this band? Who is this violent band?
And of course, in clean cut Bible Belt of Oklahoma, exactly. My mom would have had my height if she saw that. I would have never got an AC/DC album into the house with
not at all
cover art.
Not at all. And then seventh grade wrapped up in summer of 1980. I went to, you and I both were at Central Junior High.
Yep.
For seventh grade, but we didn't know each other.
Yeah, I was too cool for you.
Yeah, you were cool. I was a nerd. But I left after that seventh grade. I moved to Montana. And then in Montana, again, I'm digging more into music. I really got into like Boston, and I heard Rush for the first time. And we used to have a long school bus ride. And actually, this probably wasn't until about 81. Mm-hmm. But I remember they would always play Back in Black on the school bus ride. So I was hearing Back in Black all the time at that time. Hell's Bells. The whole album,
You'd have to be way in the back to hear that. If you was anywhere near the bus driver, you were going to get shut down.
Our bus driver, this old guy named Glenn, he didn't even pay attention. He didn't know what was going on. But yeah, some of those songs, had an adult been paying attention, they probably would have made us turn it off. But I loved it. And then I joined the Columbia House Record Club. And I got
We all did.
I ordered. I'll admit it, right? When you're in 7th grade, the coolest song in the world was "Big Balls," right, off of "Dirty Deeds." So I ordered "Dirty Deeds," and of course I couldn't play that around my mom. You know, you couldn't play.
You could barely play it around your friends.
Exactly, you couldn't play "Big Balls" or "Love at First Feel," right, in front of your mom.
Well, or your friend's mom.
Yeah, no.
So it's like, where do you go to listen?
A bad idea.
The back of the bus.
Yeah, exactly.
with a portable cassette player.
That's right. It's one where you have the little 2 earwaxy plugs and you split it with your friend. And you have one earwax. Exactly. Yeah. That's how you did it back. That's how we rolled. This was pre-Walkman.
Man, so, you really had to have a lot of commitment.
But that was the exposure. Our exposures to AC/DC around the same time and probably very similar, but just played the heck out of that.
Yeah, played it. Listened to the back and forth. I think that I listened to every song on the album at some point, but never contiguously because of the fact that I always got stuck on AC/DC and would back then you actually had to rewind the tape.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, oh, I love this. And then you remember when they came out with the auto rewind? You could actually do one track back, and you didn't have to. See, that was
rich people had that. See, I didn't have that. Yeah, rich people. Here's something I thought of. This was short-lived, late 80s. Remember the Cassingle? Remember the Cassingles?
No, I don't remember that one.
You don't? No. Remember how you could go buy a 45 record, right? And then they started selling.
I remember I do remember the Cassingle. It came with a paper wrapper instead of a plastic one.
Exactly.
They shoved it in there and they sold it for more than what? In my
45
opinion.
would be. Yeah. They were probably like $199 or $249 versus, at Kmart in 1982, I think it was 99 cents for a 45. So you could buy a 45 for 99 cents.
But then you were old tech. You weren't cutting edge.
No, I wasn't. But I just thought about that today, the Cassingle. I mean, they were only around for like 2 years and they were gone.
Yeah.
So here's what's fascinating about Back in Black. And think about this, okay? Mm-hmm. Think about the odds here. First of all, 1979, they have an album. Their most popular album to date.
Yep.
Highway to Hell.
Mm-hmm.
Huge album. AC/DC was on the way up. I mean, they were already pretty big, but that album was it broke them, right, in the U.S. That was a big album.
That was it.
And based on their popularity, their older albums started to sell. In fact, here's something I just learned, which shocked me. I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think their most popular album is?
Well, it's Back in Black.
Okay, what do you think their second most popular album is?
Highway to Hell.
What do you think their third most popular album is?
Thunderstruck.
So, no.
No?
Their third most popular album was Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap.
Okay.
Which surprised me. I thought For Those About to Rock would have come in.
We should do.
Yeah. But my point is, there's a term for it. I can't remember the term. And if I wasn't so heavily sedated, I probably would. But the Highway to Hell album was one of those albums that not only had tremendous sales on its own, but it made people go back and buy their back catalog. So the sales of Powerage and Let There Be Rock and Dirty Deeds, they all went up, way up with the success of Highway to Hell. So they're at the top. They're at the top. I mean, they were very...
Well, they were poised to take over the world.
They were poised. That's a great way to put it. Poised to take over the world. And then, of course, in February of 1980...
Unfortunately, alcohol poisoning again with the culprit of many lead singer band members, not lead singers.
Absolutely
took Bon Scott, And I will say that you got to figure that the remainder of the band probably thought this was done.
Absolutely. And the thing about this is, again, not to blame anyone, but the accounts I've read is, Bon was a pretty heavy drinker, notorious drinker. A friend left him, if I'm getting this right, sleeping in the car. He was passed out in the car, which was not an uncommon thing. It had happened before. His friend just
rock and roll.
Exactly. His friend just said, "Oh, he'll wake up in the morning," except he didn't. But you wonder if things would have been handled differently. Maybe he would have not died, but he did. So let's think about the timeline here. February of 1980.
He's doing what? They're riding high. Yeah. Bon Scott just puts a punctuation on riding high and dies.
And he dies. The band, I think you're exactly right. I think most of the band thought, well, that's the end of that. They did get together just a few days after his death. I think it was right after the funeral. They got together and they decided, we're going to continue. Yeah. Bon would want us to continue, and we're going to continue.
That's why I heard it.
Yep.
And I think that there's probably some truth that if you stop touring, you die, both musically and in some cases, the guys, the most compelling aspect of their life is lived on stage. So that the show must go on. I really think there's probably some truth in that in all of entertainment.
I think so. You all think about it. And I don't mean to make fun of this but on a tour, there's structure, right? There's someone, there's a manager saying, come on, guys, we got to go, getting everyone out of the hotel room, get on the bus at 11, hit the road. In between, right? In between tours, in between recording sessions, I think you're exactly right. It's the downtime where they're kind of left to their own devices. I think that's what happened here.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's a shame. But then the rebound of that, the boomerang, is what's the likelihood that you're going to be able to even come close? And if so, is the album really going to have the staying power? And I think that's the twist of where you're heading with.
Absolutely.
This is the odds were stacked against them for Back in Black to actually do anything or perform at the level of expectation, simply because how could you replace Bon Scott? You can get away sometimes cheating with a drummer that is down or out. You can maybe get by with a different guitar player, but when you lose the vocal, you lose the voice, and you better dang well have something in the background. And I'm not saying that it's impossible. Certainly, Journey over the time frame has done well with trying to mix up lead singers, and there's probably a few other bands that you could name. I know you're an aficionado, but to my mind, there, you lose the lead singer, you're gone. So when you see AC/DC come out with Back in Black, it's not just a testament to the fact that they chose to go on. It's the commitment and the level of commitment that they had. And more importantly, it proves that the creativity of such was going to be able to sustain them. Now, again, most of the songs, most of the music was pretty much there, was it not, Jeremy?
They had started working on some of the music, but I don't think most of it was done. I know some of it had been done, and this is all, by the way, Bruce Kay says some bands are over when certain people die. EVH and Neil Peart.
Exactly.
He's exactly right. Yeah, you couldn't continue without those two people. And I think a lot of people probably felt the same about Bon. And so just from a timeline, look at this. He dies in February. Was it February 19th? I don't have the date in front of me. He dies in February. They're in the studio by April. Now,
the story, if I'm remembering it, you would think if I was more prepared, I would have read all this.
March 29th. March 29th, they find a lead.
Okay, so do you know the story about? Tell us a little about Brian. What was Brian doing? First of all,
he was actually he had been in Geordie. I think it was called Geordie. But he was living with his parents. He had given up. He'd not given up per se on life, but given up on the fact that he was
the rock and roll dream.
Yeah, and
working as a mechanic, I believe.
Exactly, and I think that was the family trade. Mm-hmm. But again, from his standpoint, he thought, this is behind me, and it's kind of like the idea that and that's the big piece is he wasn't working on any projects, so he was free. So my understanding was that he got one of the producers had a relationship, knew of him from the time singing with Geordie, and recommended. I think there's this Brian guy, and keep in mind, I think that the rock scene was enough that everyone kind of knew everyone, but you didn't know that the puzzle would piece together in such the way that it did. And I don't think that Brian Johnson actually thought he could plug into that, and so he was dismissive of his own talent, but he went anyway because they had asked to, hey, come down, we want to hear you, and again, he was surprised that he was, just in the idea that here I'm an old man, these guys are young, they're upcoming, and rock and roll is kind of benched on the cornerstone of youth. And so he really was dismissive, and maybe that was the relaxed state. I think he actually says the fact that he was so relaxed going in that the pressure wasn't, it would have been pressure on someone younger, but he was a journeyman. And because of that, he had the kind of voice that synced in, and they knew right away, I think, because he was ready to go back home.
Well, yeah. And I think, he had I got nothing to lose attitude. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And did they audition other people, JR?
I think they did. I don't remember the playlist on that, but they had other people. But I think that was the point that made it dismal for the bandmates, is that they hadn't heard a voice that stood. So they gave them hope that they could. We're not on board the Hindenburg here. So when they heard Brian, it was enough of a stark realization that they didn't need to listen to anyone else. I know after that. So
he was the guy. They had him come in. They're in the studio. Let me see. Let me look at my cheat sheet here. They recorded it in April and May of 1980. Of course, Mutt Lange, the famous Mutt Lange, is the producer.
Yeah.
And here's what fascinates me. You listen to Back in Black, you listen to Highway to Hell. Brian's style and Bond's style are pretty different. They're pretty different, completely different, really.
Well, I think Brian said he wasn't going to try and sound like Bond. He didn't think that he could do that.
Right.
But he thought he could bring something that was still commercial enough to sell. And obviously he was right.
It worked.
And so I think you get into trouble trying to emulate the voice, of somebody who's just recently gone. And I don't think the fans were expecting the exact aspect, because again, I don't think Bon Scott could stand still on stage or lean into a mic and with both hands. He seemed to be all over.
He was all over.
So they kind of rip your shirt off and run around half naked on stage.
So here's what's similar about both of them, right? If you go back and listen to a Geordie album, I'm trying to remember, because I've gone back and listened to Geordie, and I'm not sure that if I didn't know it was Brian Johnson, I'm not sure that I'd be able to tell it was Brian Johnson, because we're used to the Brian Johnson we hear, that Brian Johnson sound. Well, in Geordie, he's singing, right? He's more singing. He's not the heavy metal or not. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the genre didn't rest on a gravelly voice.
Exactly.
He actually was trying to articulate in a way that we would think traditional singing is.
Yeah,
and there's again, to frame that correctly, I think that probably the band was more aligned to that too.
Yeah, Geordie was a power pop band, right? There's actually some pretty good guitar playing, but it's definitely more of a pop vein than what AC/DC was doing. Now, here's what's funny. Bon Scott had also come from a very loungy pop type band before AC/DC as well. So it's funny to go back and watch these old clips of like seeing Bon Scott when he was like in leisure suits, singing total pop stuff. And as you were talking about, we're talking about them being so different. And Brian's idea was, I'm not going to try and sound like Bon. I'm a different person. I think of another band that was very successful with the same formula. That's Van Halen.
Oh, yeah.
Sammy comes in and he says, I'm not going to be Dave. I'm a different person. And he was a different person.
And
when Ronnie Dio replaced Ozzy in Black Sabbath, he said, I'm a different person than Ozzy. I'm going to do my own thing. So there's 3 examples of bands that were successful with new lead singers. Okay. It's interesting. It's interesting.
It's interesting, and I think that the things that you touch on there, maybe there's natural progressions. Again, when you correlate Bon Scott and maybe the natural thing from that kind of pop, more commercial. I mean, maybe the natural progression is to something that's okay. I can diverge, especially Brian, who's a journeyman. He's probably had toyed around with a lot of different sounds before settling on where he was as an accomplished vocalist at that time. So, he thought his career was over, but the thing is, he had the virtue of having experience. Yeah. So, I don't think I don't think that he had ruined any of his vocal capacity at that point. So who knows? But whatever he tapped into was hugely successful. And when he delivered to a 6th grade adolescent, gave me chills. And I know that when I jumped onto the AC/DC bandwagon, I was there for life. And that's probably the piece. Now, again, I wasn't familiar with Bon Scott when I was in 1979, 1980. I mean, it wasn't something, I wasn't peeling back the layers of music at that time. That's why it's so fun now, years later, to go back and understand that the fabric of these albums and then the irony of success that it would take to lose the one of the driving members of the band, that pretty much some would say the identity, the guy that puts the fingerprint on the band. Other than Angus, I think Angus definitely had a stage present with all of his schoolboy fanatics. But I think that piece of it speaks to the idea that first you have to be prepared, then you have to have an opportunity. You can't have success without those 2 components: preparation and not often preparation and then opportunity. So Bon, his passing gave Brian an opportunity that he probably was not likely to ever have, and he maximized on it. And so he brought his A game. It shows. And then here we are talking about it, a band who's re-released that album maybe 4 or 5 times in different, it's the same album, right. Remastered, mind you, but each time it hits on a re-release, it climbs the charts. It sells.
Yep.
And so, and can you name too many bands that will remaster the album and resell it and almost enjoy the same success?
No, not really. But here's the thing: my favorite Angus quote. Angus says, "I get sick and tired of people saying we've made the same album 12 times."
we've made the same album 13 times. You know, so whatever the number is now. And but that's it. That's funny when you hear that. But to be honest, let's be honest. That's one of the things we like about AC/DC is we know their last album, the one that came out a year or two ago. Can't even remember what it was called. It was a great album, and guess what? It sounded like every other AC/DC album, and I was okay with that because there's a comfort level. Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know,
and I agree with that. You know, obviously, we were talking about different albums, Thunderstruck, and all these others. That came out. They have a driving component to them that it's AC/DC. So it satisfies, it checks the boxes. It makes you feel, hey, it's almost like, I will say this, I'll compare it to whatever your favorite drink is, whether it be Coors Light or Dr. Pepper. When you pop the can, you know what you're going to get. With AC/DC, you pop the can, it's the flavor that you want. And it's not like if you popped a Dr. Pepper can and you tasted Pepsi, now that would be a problem.
Yeah.
So I think AC/DC embraced that from the start, and they knew who was buying their albums. More importantly, they knew who was their listening group, and they were able to deliver that and deliver it obviously on consecutive basis. But
so,
again,
look,
go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt if you were with that thought. So I mentioned Van Halen.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned Black Sabbath. Both bands that had, and there are others, but those are the first two I think of, right? Van Halen, Black Sabbath, that had very popular lead singers that were replaced in the band. Now, it happened in AC/DC too, but I hear it with Ozzy, or not with Ozzy. I hear it with Sabbath fans. I hear it with Van Halen fans. There's a lot of debate. A lot of Van Halen fans, it's only Dave. Oh, Van Hagar. Oh, Sammy ruined Van Halen. Or Sabbath. Oh, it's not Sabbath without Ozzy, right? So you get these arguments between the fan bases. You and I have talked about this before. I treat them like two different bands,
two separate bands, and
that way it's good. It's all good because you can love the Dave Van Halen, you can love the Sammy Van Halen, you can love the Ozzy Sabbath, you can love the Dio Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what's funny. I don't see as much of that among AC/DC fans, and here's my theory, and maybe I'm overthinking this. Bon Scott died. They didn't have a choice but to replace him. Do you think maybe that accounts for there not being the arguments between the two eras?
I would say so. I think I buy into that argument, and simply because you got to figure when you're at the pinnacle or if you're at the top and people are salivating over that next release. Think of the disappointment that you would have been set up for. So I'm thankful that AC/DC tried. I'm more thankful that they succeeded because, like I said, it certainly frames a time period in my life and I think, we keep always beating this horse to death on this, but it frames a time period in my life, which I can, I go back to when I play the song. Maybe that's why they're able to successfully re-release that album and remastered or on Bonfire. They released it again, that same album and same songs, but the idea would be that it's hitting something. Certainly, it probably rings more true than other albums have in the past, and I wouldn't say it was necessarily a recipe. I think that's really authenticity. So some people will say, well, we delivered the same music. Now, I think what happened is we delivered the same band and the intensity. And so it's the same experience. And so if you can deliver the same experience, that's the hitch that kind of keeps everything going. And the linchpin of life is if you can deliver something that is just as good as the original in a way that it has the impact on the audience, then you're going to have people coming back for you based on authenticity. So don't try and be something different. They never have. And I think that there's been obviously times when maybe they were better advised. They were advised to drive away from that, looking for something that was a little more, can we transition to AC/DC a little commercially in the 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s? Well, I don't think they ever betrayed their sound.
No, they have even. I mean, you look at Angus's guitar sound, right? I mean, it's pretty much it's an SG into a Marshall, right?
Some would argue that Mutt Lange had a lot to do with that sound.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I do think it was Def Leppard was around the same time frame, but not with Mutt Lange.
Mm-hmm.
But,
yeah, exactly. And Mutt Lange, we could do a whole episode on Mutt Lange, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure he had a lot to do with it, but at the base, right? It was Angus and Malcolm. Malcolm never gets the credit he should get.
Well, Angus gives him credit.
Angus does, but Malcolm was the guy that came up with the riffs, and then it was Angus's job he'd play the solos and he'd do the show, right? And Malcolm's just right back there at the back of the stage holding things down, but he was the guy, he was the guy.
Well, my favorite story was when Malcolm was talking to Angus on stage. They were doing a sound check, and he's playing a warm up, which to get his fingers ready for the play, and just getting sound checked out. And Malcolm looks over to Angus and says, "What's that you're playing?" He says, "It's so a finger warm up. It gets me limber." He says, "No, that's an AC/DC song, Thunderstruck."
Thunderstruck. That sounds like one that would have started out as like just an exercise.
Fret exercise.
Yeah. Yep. And that, and from a guitar player standpoint, JR and I both play a little guitar. From a guitar player standpoint, the beauty of AC/DC is the simplicity, right? Mm-hmm. They're not hard to play. Mm-mm. But AC/DC, more than any other band I can think of, uses space, right? Mm-hmm. They don't try and fill every measure with a jillion notes. And another trick, you notice, I think this is a Mutt Lange trick. You hear this a lot on AC/DC. You'll hear the first verse, it's all guitar. Mm-hmm. And it might, then the bass comes in the second verse, and it's like, all of a sudden, I mean, it's like, just very powerful and simple, and
then percussion somewhere.
Yeah, then the drums. Of course, you got the drums in there, and it's perfect. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then that's the blueprint. But here's the other thing that's fascinating to me, JR. Mm-hmm. And this happens without me even noticing. Right? Listen to some live Brian Johnson AC/DC. Right? It's live. They're at River Plate or wherever. There's lots of concerts on the internet that you can watch, and I'll be halfway through a song and I'll realize that's a Bond song that he's singing. And it doesn't seem weird. It doesn't seem weird because I guess over the last 40 years we're used to hearing Brian's voice, but you realize that's Brian singing TNT. And it works. I mean, even though his delivery's different, he's a different voice than Bond.
Here's something that might do that though to you as well. You remember how you said that when they released when Back in Black prior to that Highway and Hell came out, it gave a lot of stock to their prior portfolio and raised the equity, right? So everybody goes back and buys this. Well, see, I wasn't on board yet, so when I'm hearing it, I think that Brian had got in and had he was the primary voice to me. So then when I went back, I'm like, oh, this Bon Scott's guy's really good. But I heard things relative to Brian. And again, the benefit of age is ignorance. So, when you're young, you just don't know. Right. And so for me, it's like, again, you peel back the layers on it and you realize, oh, that is a really, really good song. So hearing, for me, the second love was falling in love with Bon Scott's AC/DC. My first love was Brian Johnson. hadn't really caught on early enough. And if I'd have been a West Coast guy, maybe I'm cutting edge, but who knows? At this point, I think that what happened was I was familiar with Brian and then discovered Bon as a result of that. And then you go, oh, this is cool. And you listen to what they were doing, and it's almost, again, like two different bands in some ways. But I'm more familiar with Brian's voice, so I was comfortable hearing him sing those older songs.
And here's the thing, based on the math, right? Mm-hmm. Based on numbers, I think that's probably the case with most AC/DC fans.
Yeah.
Because AC/DC was such a huge album. I mean, they played You Shook Me All Night Long on Top 40 radio, So
that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's probably the case with most people is the Brian version of AC/DC was their first exposure, and then they went back to the Bond stuff. I bet that's the case with,
I would argue that's probably the case. I mean, if we're talking to someone who's 10 years older than me,
Yeah.
And in Bruce's case, saying, they were huge in Atlanta and that makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially Black Sabbath years is what he's saying. And that makes sense.
Bon Scott.
Oh, okay. I was like, Black Sabbath. Well, how you were tying things in, Jeremy?
Exactly.
I always tend to go back to that genealogical tree of rock and roll and try to go, okay, because everything's tied in. But anyway.
But no, and that's a good point. Bruce says AC/DC was huge in Atlanta during the Bon Scott years, which actually were the Black Sabbath years, JR.
Mm-hmm.
So,
there you go.
So they both work. But I think the majority, because or Back in Black was the breakthrough album, right? I think that most people, that's their version of AC/DC too, is probably Brian Johnson. And he's been in the band for 40 years, 50? How long ago was 1980? I'm doing the math in my head.
Well, I bet they took the bottle out of his hand.
Yeah, 44 years. Almost 44 years.
4 years. It's a long time for anybody to do anything.
And Bon was 6 years, 5 or 6 years in the band.
Whoa, what a mark.
Yeah, for sure. So let's do this really quick. I'm looking at I want to just look at the track listing here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's see. And I'm going to put everyone on. Here's another thing, JR. I want your opinion on this.
Mm-hmm.
Never look a gift horse in the mouth first. That's the first. Never look a gift horse in the mouth. And I'm looking a gift horse in the mouth, what I'm about to say. And you might think I'm crazy, but I'm going to say it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
When you stream, right? When you go to Spotify and listen to an entire album, we're used to the albums we bought, right? And albums used to have sides, right?
Yep.
Side 1, side 2. You were used to them being in a certain order.
Yep.
You got 4 or 5 songs on each side. That was the album. That was the album experience. Well, now you go and stream the 2013 remix of Back in Black, and there's like 50 songs on it because they go, here's a demo version, here's a remix version, here's the radio edit, here's a demo version, so part of me is like, well, that's kind of cool. But part of me is like, I want to hear the iconic album that I grew up with, side 1, side 2. And it's like the special features on a DVD, right? Those are cool, but I want them completely separate.
It's a different experience. Here's what's funny though. Okay, I don't know if you remember if you were listening to 8 tracks. My dad had a bunch of 8 tracks. Oh, yeah. Here's the problem I have. When I listen to the same songs now, I still hear the click when it's changing tracks. I'll be singing along and waiting for that.
You're waiting for it. It never stopped. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially like Eagles Long Run. I could tell you where each break was.
Okay. So I mentioned the Columbia House. The very first order I made on Columbia House was all 8-track. And Eagles The Long Run was one that I ordered. I can completely relate to where the breaks were. Yeah.
It's funny, but I still hear him. And maybe that's the thing that's Pavlovian about this is that, he's like, well, I don't want anything. How many arguments occurred in production? Which song is the intro? Which song is number 5 and which goes to side B? They probably argued the heck out of it, slaved over the thought process, and then fast forward to 2023, we're butchering stuff. I mean, you push, you're known for a single. No one's putting out any albums now. You get a single and you make a hit off that and such. So it's funny that we would, how much we emulated and loved the idea of someone took the time to put together this arrangement.
Yes.
And Styx was definitely an arranged album. If you listen to Styx,
totally.
AC/DC might have been the same way.
And
would it be any different if it started with a different song than Hell's Bells to start off that album?
You'd think, and I know there's limitations because you only got so much tape, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you'd think they'd try and work it to where the tracks wouldn't switch over in the middle of a song. But they would switch over right in the middle of a song.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's funny because the volume would go down and you're going like, who's touching the volume?
Go back up.
It goes right back up. Yeah. But dude, that was fun. I mean, that was definitely the late 70s, mid 70s, and early 80s.
And then remember, my next order, I started ordering cassettes then. And then on the cassettes, I remember on Women and Children First, the Van Halen cassette I ordered from the record club. Mm-hmm. There was always a thing that would say, a little note that would say, the blank tape at the end of side B is necessary to keep the song sequence of the album. So like side 1 might be 21 minutes long and side 2 might only be 15 minutes long. But they do that to replicate the song order on the actual album. So,
and that's cool, except if you couldn't wait.
Exactly. And to Bruce's point, songs like Rush that had long songs, he says 8-track Rush, A Farewell to Kings, had a bad click spot right in the cool intro to Xanadu. So if you've got a long 11-minute song, it's going to get chopped up by the 8-track. That was a crazy format.
But man, and we thought that was high tech. I mean, my dad, I wasn't buying 8-tracks at that time per se, like, but my dad had multiple type 8-track players, one for the car. He had a 8-track player for the home stereo. So I mean, you were committed to the format. Yeah. But man, you had to be really committed to and I'm not sure why.
If I remember right, you guys still have a working Betamax too.
Yes, we do. And we still have a working 8-track. And what's funny is we still have pretty much my old dad's collection. Of course, Dad listens to that stuff still. And he's got he's a garage tunes kind of guy.
I have a lot of great memories being in your garage while your dad was listening to the KOMA Good Guys on his radio out in the garage.
But dude, he was all into Van Halen and Night Ranger. He went to Van Halen with me live. Me and Steve.
Nice.
It was Van Hagar, but still, nice. He loves ZZ Top, and we went to this. So it's pretty good when you can walk through life with your father and share tunes and stuff.
Yeah, see, I don't think my dad would go to a Van Halen show.
Well, Dad fortunately never actually listened to much of the lyrics on AC/DC, or we probably had a little different discussion in the garage. But the American Thighs piece. I remember the first time I heard my dad sing that lyric.
You're like, oh, Dad, don't sing that.
He's like, Dad, you don't. He's singing along, and you're going, oh, Dad, I hope he doesn't understand.
Oh no, he's saying,
oh no, and then he's like, there's that stark realization that what did I just say? It's funny.
And to be honest, one of the funny things, it's funny. You got to laugh. Some of the lyrics did not age well.
No.
In this politically correct environment that we live in today.
It's rock and roll, man.
It's rock and roll. So, okay, listen to these song titles. Speaking of this, okay, side 1, we've got Hell's Bells, one of the great lead-off album tracks of all time. Shoot to Thrill. What Do You Do for Money, Honey? Giving the Dog a Bone. Let Me Put My Love Into You.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Then we got
Side 2 is Back in Black, You Shook Me All Night Long, Have a Drink on Me, Shake a Leg, Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution. And, this had to have been a big inspiration to the guys when they were making Spinal Tap.
Oh.
Got to be. Remember in Spinal, I was thinking about this. Remember the Spinal Tap album when it finally came out? It was black.
Yes. It was black.
And they had songs like, Working on a Sex Farm.
Working on a sex farm. Yeah.
I'm sure that they kind of took a page from the misogynist.
I think they took it to they took it to another level. But I think their Black album was an answer to the Beatles' White album.
Yeah, I think it probably was.
But either way, we can. But for purposes of AC/DC, we know
the original "Smell the Glove." Remember, the album cover was too racy.
That's right.
A greased naked woman on all fours being forced to smell the glove.
That's right.
So it was a compromise. The compromise was they put out a completely black album with no words on it.
No, I just love Nigel. Always like his response when he finds out he's not going to get. It's hard. It's hard. He's not going to get the cover he wants. I almost could see Angus.
Yeah, totally. So putting you on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
What are your?
You always do.
Well, I know that's why I wanted you on, so I had someone to put on the spot all the time.
Yeah, there you go.
What are your favorite songs off of this album?
Well, again, I've made the statement Back in Black. That had to be the hook that caught the fish, right? So
yeah,
okay. I keep in mind I didn't get to play some of the others because not out loud anyway. If you had your headphones on, you were okay. But Giving the Dog a Bone.
Yeah.
But Hell's Bells as an intro, I don't see that. I can't start this album. Some albums you can put on shuffle and just listen to the song, and anything that pops up is good. This song, this album really needs to be played in continuity. And the reason why is because if it starts off, that this album starts off with any different song or leads into a different song that that's not original to the playlist. I'm like you. It's not the song. This is the album, man. Get that off. I don't want to. And plus, I don't want to hear the same song twice because you can't intro back over. And I think they I think they actually cut the downtime between the songs so that you actually went straight forward into. Maybe that was just the way I had the CD set up. But anyway, just Giving the Dog a Bone.
Yeah.
Good. And You Shook Me All Night Long. Of course, You Shook Me All Night Long. You could argue spot just off of Back in Black. But
those are all great. They're all good songs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, there's the one we think of as the hits, the ones that you hear on the classic rock station. Hell's Bells, Back in Black, You Shook Me All Night Long. Those are probably the three big ones.
Yep.
But Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, great song. Giving the Dog a Bone.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to.
What do you do for money, honey? What do you do for fun?
Yeah, that's. It's a great album, and here's the thing. And I don't know if I made this point. I think I did, but I want to reiterate. Think about this. I can't think of another album. They're coming off. Think of a band's biggest album. Okay, they came off their biggest album. Highway to Hell was a platinum album, super successful album, and their lead singer dies at the top. They're at the top of the world. Lead singer dies. Mm-hmm. They go from thinking the band's over. All of a sudden, they're in the studio in April and May. In July, was it July they released the album?
July they released the album.
July they released the album. And not only did the album do well, not only did it become AC/DC's best-selling album, it became the best-selling hard rock album ever. And it's like 30 times platinum by now.
And there's not anything close. That's what I like about it.
What are the odds of that?
I'm trying to think of anything that's even close to that's in that same. Because in terms of rock. Because what is it? It's Michael Jackson, AC/DC,
Yeah, there have been other big rock albums.
But no one's at that level though.
No,
even
not like that.
Fleetwood Mac, Eagles. We think about I think of both of those bands I mentioned, both the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac, are fairly eclectic in their in their listening audience, as well as their because you had so many different talents, Buckingham and everyone committed, and Nix and V. So,
and here's another big difference. The Eagles and Fleetwood Mac got played like crazy on radio. AC/DC didn't.
No, and so for them to settle into that number 2 overall sales slot,
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, unlikely, and hardly
unlikely. No one would have guessed that they'd ever do it. I'm sure most people thought.
I bet they didn't think they were.
No way. And you mentioned it. Again, one of the things we like about AC/DC is, let's be honest, they're predictable.
Mm-hmm.
It's like your analogy said. When I open the can of my AC/DC, I know exactly what I'm going to.
It better sound like AC/DC, and
it does.
Yep, it satisfies. It delivers.
Yeah, and here's what's funny. This is short. I'm going to make fun of short guys here, JR.
Be careful. This short guy can take you down.
JR, if you were in AC/DC, like Brian Johnson, you'd probably be the tallest guy in the band.
Well, I'm fine with that. I mean, thinking about Dio and all. I know. It's short guys that rule the world. It's not these.
Brian Johnson moved in, and he was probably the tallest guy in the band. Cliff Johnson, the bass player, he looks really tall. It's because everyone else is like 5'1", right?
Yeah, when you're looking from the audience up to the stage, they all look tall.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, they all look tall. But anyways, so I mean, this is an album. It's kind of like when we talked about Dark Side of the Moon.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a huge album. There's not much you can say that hasn't been said about this album, other than what are the odds, right? What are the odds? And it's one of these albums, like you said it, you got to play it in its entirety. There's the Back in Black experience. You got to put the needle on that first track, play
enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride.
Let the wind go through your hair.
That's right.
On the T-top Trans Am. Yeah.
Breaker.
Yeah, breaker.
My son I was telling him about CB radios, and he's like, "Can you still get a CB?" I'm like, I guess you could.
Yeah, a Citizens band, you still can.
But, so that's my next goal.
In all honesty, Jeremy, I still have a CB. You can get them in Oklahoma. They're just now where you're at too, but in Oklahoma there's still areas where there's cell phone.
We have all kinds of dead spots.
Abysmal.
But the problem is, in 1979, for those youngsters, JR and I lived through this, so we know it. Smokey and the Bandit came out, and it did two things, right? Everyone wanted a Trans Am with the chicken with the Firebird on it.
Firebird.
Good. And a CB radio.
Exactly.
So I can remember going on family vacations for the next 2 years. My dad had his CB, and he's talking to the truckers.
And breaker 19.
Yeah, breaker 19. But
Smokey check.
Here's the problem. If I buy a CB, who am I going to talk to?
Truck drivers. That's pretty much it.
Do truck drivers still
yes, they do. But here's more importantly, I'll buy a newer update, and maybe we can boost our signals and talk. We can do the next podcast over CB.
Over CB? I like that. Okay. Well, let's work on that.
I think we can do it.
Don't forget that. So,
we're bringing the 70s back and early 80s.
Well, JR, I've wasted enough of your time, and clearly we've wasted everyone else's time.
That's what we do, and we're excellent. We're professionals at that.
What we do. One last thing, nothing to do with anything we're talking about. I found a video on YouTube last night. Can't remember the guy's name.
It wasn't me.
It's an old guy, probably 70 years old. He's playing an acoustic version of Iron Maiden's Wasted Years. And it's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Well, now I've got to go see this.
You got to find it. I can't remember the guy's name. It's an old guy. Just put in old guy playing Wasted Years on acoustic guitar. First of all, the song's a great song. The lyrics are great lyrics. It's a great message in that song. But to see this guy who's like 70 years old playing it and singing it, for someone who didn't know it was an Iron Maiden song, you know, my folks would probably hear that song and think, that's such a beautiful song. Anyways, check it out.
I will. That's a good morsel to leave on.
Check it out. And with that, thank you so much for tuning in. Follow us on Twitter, X. We're at Classic Guitar R1, at Classic Guitar R1. And you can always email us at classicguitarrock@mail.com. Classicguitarrock@mail.com. JR, as always.
Always fun, Jeremy.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you listening. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Live long and prosper. See ya. Nanu.
No, wrong.
Thanks for listening to the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.
Oh, sweetney.
Please like, subscribe, and share. You can email us at classicguitarrock@mail.com.
We're not ordinary people. We're morons.
We'll see you for the next episode of the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.